Anybody hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Inspired necklace. Yes, 65 carats of diamonds and sapphires included.
It looks like okay, looks like we have 14 people who've joined us so far. We're gonna wait just a few more minutes to give more people a chance to log in. While we're waiting, can we do quick introductions for the people who are already on? Katie, can we start with you?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. My name's Katie McKeon. I'm an attorney at Public Counsel, which is a legal aid organization that works in LA County. Our offices are in Koreatown, but we work all over the county. And I work with the LA Street Vending campaign and have been doing so for the past 3 years or so. So Jen invited me to join you all. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Brenda, I hope I'm saying that correct. Do you mind doing a quick introduction for everyone?
Hi, no, I don't mind. I'm Brenda Hines. I am owner of Bedazzled, a vendor. I've been in Lamert Park for 7 months now, and I have fashion and accessories.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Jeanette?
Hi, I'm Jeanette Miller. I've been vending at Lamert Park for 10 years now. And the name of my is Black, just Black.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Kareem? Not sure what happened there. How about Vernell?
Hello, hi guys. Vernell here with SoCal Shop Local. Pleasure to be here. Also the founder of Small Business Digital Toolkit LLC, a California-based web hosting company.
Thank you. When you're not speaking, mute your mic. That will help us be able to hear, put down the background noise.
Hi, yes, my name is Kareem. I'm a small vendor out here at the remote park. Been out here for a year. I do functional food and medicinal cuisine.
Thank you, welcome. I'm just looking at names as they pop up, but please, everyone feel free to jump in and introduce yourself. Diane Robertson.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Diane Robertson. I'm joining this this afternoon as a Lamert Park resident stakeholder. I serve on the Neighborhood Council in the role of Area 3 rep, and Area 3 is Lamert Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you. Can everyone please mute themselves if they're not speaking so we don't get the background noise? Mr. Onyx, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Onyx Bate, and my business is Like the Stone. I've been a vendor at Lamert Park for a little over 8 years, and I sell handcrafted jewelry and accessories for men and women. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. Zinnia, am I saying that correctly?
Hi, it's Zanina. I'm a vendor. My business is Wholesome Zen, and I sell vegan food and I've been a vendor for about 6 months in Lamert Park.
Welcome, thank you. Terry?
Hey everyone, I'm Terry Scott. I'm an arts producer at Lamert Park Village. I co-founded Lamert Park Village Inc., a nonprofit that deals with fundraising and arts producing in the village. I'm an organizer with We Love Lamert, and just basically an arts producer. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for being here this morning. Let's see, Latricia Booth.
Hi, everyone. My name is Latricia Booth. I have a up and coming, I just started a community organization called Women Move Powerfully. We go into the communities of LA and surrounding regions to give food, clothes, shoes, water, toiletries to the homeless. We have served Lamert Park area as well. And I would like to become a vendor because we have some merchandise, and basically proceeds from that merchandise goes towards us, getting food to provide to the homeless, getting toiletries and vitamins so that they can keep their immunity up during this time, because they're outdoors and we're fortunate enough to be indoors. And so we just thought that was really important to make sure that they're also keeping their immunities up right now. So that's a little bit about me, and thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for the work that you do. Billion, could you introduce yourself?
Hey, greetings, family. My name is Billion with the Africa Town Coalition. We are organizing to claim the area as our Africa Town. Every Sunday, we have a mutual aid program where we provide food, tents, sleeping bags. Past couple months, we've been raising funds to get rooms for our brothers and sisters who are homeless. We also provide security for a number of businesses and vendors who are out there. We've been doing maintenance in the area, and prior to the organizing of this association, we've been in a lot of these meetings we'll be speaking about later to advocate for the rights of vendors and others in our community.
Thank you so much for that, Billion. Next, we have Baby.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Baby. I'm with Dance for Black Lives, and we were invited to kind of sit in on the meeting. We're hoping that we could have a Dance for Black Lives event at Lamert Park on the 27th. And yeah, we're a nonprofit group, and we collaborate with mutual aid groups. I'm also part of Care Block, that is also a mutual aid group. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. Nadia?
Hello, my name is Nadia. I'm the owner of Caledonia Organic Fruit Lemonades. I've been vending at Lamert for the past 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Naima?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm outside. It's a little loud. My name is Naima Sawyer. I am the owner of Red Door Entertainment LLC, which is an event hosting space. I'm also working with my mother to start her catering business, which is Chef Joy Unique Eats, as well as the co-owner of Divine Nine Drip, which is a accessory clothing line for melanated people. And I've just started my new venture, which is Black Business Network Los Angeles. And we're providing resources, linkages, and event spaces for Black businesses in the Los Angeles County area. I'm also hoping to obtain and get more information as to vending options for other Black businesses in Los Angeles. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you for being here this morning. Next, we have Lonnie Rose.
Hello, my name is Lonnie. I'm the owner of Holy Mother Vegan food truck, and I've been vending in Lamert Park for, well, since 2019 of August. Glad to be here. Nice to meet you guys.
Nice meeting you. Thank you for being here. And Mike Lott. Okay. Thank you, Mike. Put in the chat. He said he's working on a t-shirt line now. And then Betty Rocks.
Hi, my name is Betty Rocks. I am the owner of Caribbean Girls Clothing and Boutique. I represent women of the African and Caribbean diaspora, and I have only been vending for the past 3 months in Lamert, and so I'm pretty new to the community. I'm just here to learn and understand everything that I need to know. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here and for introducing yourselves. My name is Jennifer Laurent, also known as LA Legal Assistant. I'm a registered legal document assistant, and for just over the past year, I've been coming into Lamert trying to help street vendors register for their permits. In order to get the permits, there's a process you go through that involves getting a business tax registration certificate, getting a California seller's permit, and then going down to the Bureau of Street Services and paying a fee and getting the permit. One of the things that we started hearing as we were helping people get their permits is that for some people, specifically food vendors, the permit process is very, very stringent, somewhat confusing, and it's seeming to be somewhat expensive. So we wanted to get information out to the food vendors on how we could better help them to get their permits and to be in compliance. Another thing that we noticed is that when we tapped into community meetings like the EQUA meetings and the village stakeholder meetings and things like that, there was a lot of community concern about the cleanliness of the village after the weekend marketplace. There were concerns about traffic and about security. So we, started saying, well, how does that get addressed with the vendors? Because all of these things are being discussed in these other community meetings and groups, but we were noticing that there was not a lot of vendors there or even vendor representation to speak up on behalf of the vendors, to take notes and bring back to the vendors as to how we can be part of the solutions. And then there's also some, for lack of a better word, rumors that there are groups that don't want the vendors to be in Lamert anymore. So there's a concern of, as things change based on development, based on the train coming in and things of that nature, what place, how do the vendors fit into all of these changes? Is there a place being held for the vendors? So initially, when we were organizing, we were trying to figure out, what's the best way to get information out, and also to receive information in from the vendors as to what it is, what resources they need. The overwhelming response was just information on what the street vending rules are. Where can you vend? Can you be on the sidewalk? Can you be in the street? There are certain places people are told that they're not allowed to vend within so many feet of these particular buildings or landmarks and things of that nature. So, and then on top of that, we now have, for the past few weeks, we've had the LAPD, the fire department, and inspectors from Bureau of Street Services coming out on Saturdays and Sundays, talking to the vendors and trying to do some education, but also doing some warning, saying that within the next few weeks, they're going to start enforcing, writing tickets, and shutting non-compliant vendors down. So with that being the prevailing energy right now, we reached out to Katie of Public Counsel to get accurate information as far as the street vending process goes and what vendors need to do to be in compliance. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Katie, and hopefully she can give us, background details on the laws. And then if people have questions, then she'll be able to field some of those questions. So Katie, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much. But before I start, I just wanted to introduce my colleague, Sergio Jimenez. He had to join a few minutes late, so missed the introductions. But Sergio, do you want to introduce yourself to the group?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everybody. Sergio Jimenez. I'm a community organizer with Community Power Collective and also the LA Street Vending campaign. Thank you for inviting me. I apologize for being late. I had something prior, but I'm glad that it didn't take that long. I'm looking forward to any type of questions, answering any of them, and trying to figure out how we can move forward and hopefully establish some a great vending community in Lamert Park.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sergio. So I am going to provide just a little bit of background about kind of the LA street vending campaign and just kind of the history of street vending in LA and in California, really, and then provide some information about the current permit system and the different regulations. I do want to say very much from the outset that the City of LA street vending program is very, very far from perfect. It's relatively new. And so there are a lot of things that we think need to change. And so I can kind of point out some of those things, but would also love to hear what you all have seen, because clearly a lot of you have been a part of the vending community in Lamert Park for a long time. So you all are really the experts about kind of what a system that would work should look like. So the LA street vending campaign really started in Boyle Heights approximately 10 years ago. And it was really some vendors were facing a lot of law enforcement harassment, police harassment when they were trying to vend on, the street corners selling food and selling other types of merchandise. And so the LA street vending campaign is made up of street vendors and a lot of different organizations who have come together to advocate for the legalization of street vending, because the street vending was not legal in the city of LA and in many places in California for many decades, despite the fact that there are so many vendors working throughout the city of LA. And so starting in early 2010 or so, these organizations came together, and we have organizers, we have lawyers, and we have policy advocates who are coming together to try to push the city to recognize street vendors as a really important and vital part of the economy, and to support them and to legalize these small businesses. And so we spent a lot of time talking to the city of LA with them, looking at how they could do this. We actually were approached in the end of 2018 by a state senator, Ricardo Lara, who represented kind of some Southeast LA areas. And he wanted to do something at the state level to support sidewalk vendors. And so in 2018, the Safe Sidewalk Vending Act was passed by the state of California. And what that said was that local cities and counties could no longer give criminal citations to sidewalk vendors simply for the act of sidewalk vending. And so it basically legalized sidewalk vending throughout the state of California. And it also said, you know, if there are any pending charges, or if there are any previous convictions that folks have for sidewalk vending, those needed to be dismissed and expunged from any criminal record that somebody may have. And then finally, it said that local cities and counties could still establish some rules around sidewalk vending and could issue fines if a person was vending and not following those rules and regulations, but it could not have any criminal consequences. It could only be a fine. And so the city of LA established their sidewalk vending program in late 2018, 2019. What they did was that they wrote some rules and regulations, which Sergio just dropped in the chat. And because I'm talking to you folks who vend in and around Lamert Park, I do want to just make a fine point of saying that there are certain regulations when you're vending on a public sidewalk, and then there are a different set of regulations if you're vending inside of a park. And so those regulations can be a little different. So I wanted to recognize that. And then at the start of 2020, the city of LA said, we've had all these rules and regulations for a year. Now you have to follow those rules and regulations, but you also have to get a permit. And so as Jen was saying at the beginning of the meeting, there is now a process for vendors to get a permit to fully legalize their small business. And so there are kind of two different types of vendors according to the city of LA. There are food vendors, food and drink, anything that you consume. And then there are merchandise vendors. And so that is, you know, any type of good, or I heard a lot of jewelry, you know, soaps, different things like that. And so the city of LA has a process. As a merchandise vendor, you need 3 different permits. So you need a seller's permit, which is a state permit. It is a pretty quick application online. And Sergio, correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't cost anything to get that permit. It's more of a registration. And then the second license that you need is a LA city business license. That process can also be done online. And you have to, it's an annual license. And as long as you're making under a certain threshold in your business, you don't have to pay any taxes on it. But you kind of have to, you know the process so that you can, $100,000. So if your business is making under $100,000 annually, you wouldn't have to pay the city any business taxes, but you do have to file some paperwork in order to do that. And then finally, the third permit or license is the vending license. And so that is a license that you would get from Streets LA. Some folks call it the Bureau of Street Services, is what its name was until just recently. So if I say BSS or Streets LA, I'm talking about the same kind of city agency that oversees the vending program. And once you have those other 2 licenses, you can go in, you have to call to make an appointment and get your license. And then once you have that license, then you are fully legalized. Your business is allowed to operate on the sidewalk according to the rules and regulations. So that's the process for merchandise vendors. For food vendors, there is an additional license that you would need. And that you have to get from the county department of public health. So that's a county department. And that process right now is really complex because it involves a lot of steps. And frankly, it requires a lot of money. So you have, if you're vending from a cart, you have to vend the food from an approved cart. So that means you have to get that cart to the Department of Public Health. You have to make sure that cart meets all of these really complex rules that the state and the county have in place. And then you have to comply with all of the different kind of health requirements. Now, I know that's a very, very high overview, but I will say that that we, as the street vending campaign, so my organization, Sergio's organization, and a few others are working with the County Department of Public Health right now to figure out how to make carts that are more affordable, that actually work for street vendors for being set up on the sidewalk, and would comply with all of these health requirements to make the food vending process more realistic for folks who have had food businesses for many, many years, and but really face a really hard time going through the regulatory process to fully legalize their business. So I'll stop there because I know I've been kind of talking a lot and I'm sure there's some questions. I did get one question directed right at, specifically to me. I will say that the process that I just described, the permit process that I just described, is just for the city of LA. But if you have a city of LA vending permit, you can vend anywhere in the city of LA as long as you are following the rules and regulations. So you don't have to register your vending business at any specific location or anything like that, because not only does it work for somebody who sets up from 1 to 5 in the afternoon, but it also works for folks who are more mobile, so who are pushing ice cream carts or who are moving from place to place with different merchandise. And so just wanted to answer that question.
Yeah, and just to also, just a comment, I added 2 different types of documents in there. One is the breakdown of the state law, SB 946, in terms of what are the responsibilities, the spacings. It's very restricted. And you only, as a vendor, have X amount of space to vend. I think my understanding is 5 by 3 feet. So everything that Katie mentioned about the cart and the food and sinks and washable areas and cold and dry, it doesn't exist because there is no cart that's 5 by 3 that has all those components. The carts that do exist right now are the ones you typically, I don't know if you've seen the vendor fruit carts in the corners. They're pretty big, tall, with the windows, or you typically have to haul them on your cart, on your van, or the next step is a lunch truck. But even the ones that you kind of attach to your car and you haul, those typically don't fit on a sidewalk. So they're excluded completely from sidewalk vending because state law gives you access to sidewalk, not on the street. But the roadmap that Katie described is there on the second document that I provided through the chat.
Sergio, there was a question someone asked, is the 5 by 3 exclusively for food vendors, or is that for all vendors, that they're only supposed to take up a 5x3 space?
It's all vendors.
All vendors. Okay, thank
All
you.
vendors. So your cart has to be 5x3 or smaller, so you can have space to vend. If you're a merchandise vendor, you don't need a cart. You can just get a 5x3 table or a smaller table. What the law does allow you, it doesn't allow you to expand beyond that, because then you're kind of infringing on someone else's space. But you can actually build up. Like, I don't know if Home Depot sells, I've seen vendors use a regular table and behind them a bookshelf to go up and display their merchandise, their shoes, shampoos, or whatever. So technically that can happen, that can be allowed. There's no limit as to the tower that you can build behind you, but obviously it has to be secure. It can't tilt with a weight, or it can't, can be toppled by somebody that comes and wants to knock it down.
Sergio, since we're talking about space, can you give us, you or Katie, give us more info on vending in front of, let's say, a business? How is there a certain distance you have to be from the business? Can the business tell the street vendor that no, you can't set up in front of my shop? So can you speak to that a little, please?
Yeah, in the first document that I added, all those regulations are there. If my understanding, if I remember correctly, it needs to be, I think, 20 to 30 feet outside of a business door where you can vend. But there are certain areas where there might be very limited doors, so you're able to create your stand, your location there. But you have to have a lot of distance between you and the next vendor, you between the parking meter, fire pump, light post. You can't vend in the corner of every sidewalk above the little ramp. You have to have about, I think it's 2-3 feet after the ramp. So there's a lot of restrictions, but there's a lot of spacing between vendors. It has to be a minimum of 3 feet. And that's for emergencies. So in case there's some kind of emergency, firefighters come, like they need to be able to get through between the two vending vendors, so that not one has to like haul their stuff automatically. Yeah, businesses can tell you, hey, you're kind of in my way. It all depends on what type of individual you're kind of dealing with. We have some areas that are high density, like MacArthur Park, for example. Where there's swap meets, there's stores, there's businesses that actually take out their merchandise and use vendor space. So technically that's not supposed to happen. No business, no brick and mortar is allowed to bring their items outside and use it as a vendor space. Some do, but that's supposed to be the role of the Bureau of Street Services, to come and enforce that. I don't want to paint a negative picture of the BSS, but they focus more on street vendors than on businesses. And that's kind of like the hard dynamic that we have with that agency that's supposed to enforce, yet at the same time, educate.
Okay, now with you mentioning the brick and mortar businesses and they're not technically supposed to come out, how does the alfresco affect that right now? Because, for example, in Lamert Park, so from my understanding, alfresco started off to help restaurants, and restaurants were to be able to move outdoors because of the COVID restrictions. But in Lamert Park, in addition to the alfresco being set up for the restaurants, it was extended to the merchants as well. So can you give clarity on how those two affect each other, the street vending, and then combined with the alfresco?
Yeah, so the alfresco was that, right? A way to push restaurants to still function, still, produce. It allowed any type of food with a permit, with a food permit. So brick and mortars all have a food permit. But they allowed to kind of bypass the law, because technically the food permit is inside, not on the sidewalk. So they kind of said, okay, we're gonna kind of put up, we're not gonna look at this law as 100%, we're not gonna enforce it, we're gonna allow them to create this space. That space itself has been taking spaces from vendors. In Hollywood, it's that, right? We tried including street vendors into this process of alfresco. It was a small fight. We got folks that signed on. Vending within alfresco was allowed. It passed. But then the problem was that out of 1,000 vendors who currently have a street vending permit, there's only about 80 or so, even today, that have a food permit. And out of those 80 or so vendors, probably 5 or 6 vendors took advantage of this alfresco law because there was no outreach, because most of them were fruit vendors with those traditional big carts. So that has been a fight for us to continue, creating, pushing for the inclusion of other vendors into this program. But the city and the enforcement agencies are very harsh on vendors, and that they allow the brick and mortar businesses to kind of just be.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to that. The alfresco program is not supposed to be for businesses that don't serve food. And so it is not supposed to allow retail brick and mortar businesses to spill out onto the sidewalk. And so I know, Jen, it sounds like there is a situation where, some of the street space has been shut down to allow folks to have more room to be out and safely social distance. But that does not mean that the retail brick and mortars have the right to take up the sidewalk. They would still have to go through the regular vending permit process in order to be legally set up outside their business.
Okay, and with that being said, if that's the situation in Lamert right now where there are alfresco barriers that are taking away street space for the vendors, what, if anything, can the vendors do to resolve that, mitigate it? I don't know what the right word is, but how do the street vendors work around that, or what do we do about that?
Sergio, would you suggest that folks call that BSS hotline to make a complaint?
Yeah, the BSS created a hotline where you can, as a vendor, call and complain. That line has been good for, and I'm sorry, I'm using all these different worlds that I'm familiar with, because I think what happens in MacArthur Park, what happens in other areas, will happen in Lamert Park, and I don't know the dynamics of Lamert Park, so I have to speak to what I know about, right? But the example is right there. So if businesses are taking out the merchandise and using vendor space in Lamert Park, the BSS created this landline where you can call and complain, and it is their duty to go in and remove, or they can cite the brick and mortar owner via a warning system. So they come in, they talk to them, okay, I'm gonna come back next week, doesn't show up, or they show up and it's like the same thing or even expanded more, and they have to give them a ticket. But the community of Lamert Park, especially the vending community, has to be very organized, and it has to put a lot of pressure. So if there's 50 vendors in Lamert Park that have this near similar problem, it should be at least 40 folks that are calling, so that it's not forgotten or it's not lost, that call, we've seen it in MacArthur Park, and when 40 vendors call and blast their phone like at the same time, one after the other, that has an impact.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question that I have goes back to something that you said a little earlier. You said that there are only about 80 street vendors who've actually passed the permit process and received their street vending permits for food. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, give or take. I'm trying to look for the picture of, sorry, my file where I have the actual data as of last week. But since January 1st of 2020 till today, February 20th, it's either between 800 and 1,000 folks that have gotten that permit. So yeah, it's a minority. And it's a minority because it's extremely hard for you to get your cart. It doesn't exist, you know, and the process itself is rather confusing. It's like snakes and ladder, you know, it's just hard. You
So,
need, so it, uh-huh.
oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you. So then the question is this: if the city and the county have created this legal process, and they've set the bar so high that it's almost impossible to pass and get the permit, how can they actively enforce against or for people not complying? If you set the bar so high nobody can comply, it doesn't seem fair that then you penalize people for not complying.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is where we have a disconnect right now between what the law is and, you know, between people who are trying to follow the law, but it's so complex and expensive that it's basically impossible. And so we actually have been talking to a few different city council offices just this past week, and we're pushing them to pass a motion at the city level to basically stop enforcement practices, stop punishing food vendors who don't have their permits until there's a process in place that's actually accessible. So we can share that information, you know, once it gets introduced into City Hall, because you know, it's really helpful for folks who are experiencing this to call in and share that experience.
Okay, we would appreciate that information. Right now in the chat, there's a lot of conversation about the collection of money from vendors. It's a problem in Lamert, and I've been told it's a problem in other parts of LA as well, where you have merchants or others who go and who are collecting fees from the street vendors in order to allow the street vendors to set up. So can you speak to the charging of fees to set up?
Yeah, and so I want to kind of outline basically two scenarios, which I think are slightly different. So the first scenario, we see this and used to see this a lot, where a brick and mortar business would charge what they called rent to a vendor who wanted to set up in front of or near that brick and mortar business. Now, that is illegal. Like, a brick and mortar business cannot charge any type of rent for a vendor to set up on the public sidewalk near a brick and mortar business. That's just very clear in the law. But the second scenario, it sounds like there are some conversations about collecting money and putting it back into the community in the sense of using it to do trash cleanup and to ensure that you know, once vending ends for the day, the space is left as it was at the start of the day. So Sergio can talk a little bit about that scenario has happened in other places. And I think the question is this a voluntary agreement among a community to support each other in order to clean the space, or is it coercive? And I don't want to presume anything because I'm not in that situation, but maybe Sergio can talk a little bit about how that's worked in other places.
Yeah, when we go into a working vending area, we always go with the idea of organizing and creating power, and for them to create their structure as a community of vendors in that intersection, those streets, So there are organized communities in LA, throughout LA, where they set up their own committees. The first document that I showed says that you, as a vendor, you need to bring your own trash bags. You have to come, whatever you sell, you have to take at the end. So it's out of your own responsibility to clean up after yourself, not after somebody else. You have to kind of sweep or clean within, I think it's 40, 50 feet around you, the perimeter. So that has to happen. There are other vending areas that do that, but nevertheless, the ones that are organized, they usually take the ask of the membership, $2, $3 to pay somebody to come at the end of the day, sweep, pack everything, and take the trash. So that's part of their collective agreement within that community of organized folks. Now, if you have the city individuals charging you money or businesses charging you money, that is illegal. And that often happens when folks are not engaged within the law. They don't have an idea of what the vending rules are. That brick and mortar individuals kind of impose themselves on them because they paint the picture that, oh, I have my permits, I've been here X amount of years, I know the law, I have rights, and that's when they start painting this as being an illegal act of vending. You have to pay me for X amount. If they sell something similar to the business, also, that's also like heavy. So if I sell hot dogs and I'm standing in front of a hot dog stand, like a lot of the times the hot dog stand will call the cops constantly on me for either I can move or I can amass a bunch of tickets. But that dynamic of collective agreements, I think that has to be key within Lamert Park. That structure needs to happen so that you guys can assist each other in breaking these obstacles.
Okay, thank you for that. And just for the vendors on the call, so part of the goal of organizing this association is so that we can collectively decide, what's the best way to do this in Lamert. Because the Vendors Association, we've been getting quotes on trash bins and security, private security companies, and other resources, porta potties and things like that. I think the porta potty issue is a big thing because the park is closed and the bathroom is locked. So until that situation is resolved, we are going to have to get porta potties. So there are some people who are collecting money from vendors. They're not collecting from all of the vendors. They're going and speaking to people individually. And they're saying they're using this money for porta potties, but the vendors are asking, okay, we don't mind participating in that, but can we see some receipts or some invoices to understand, if what's being collected from all of the vendors, is it enough to put enough porta potties and get enough security and trash? Are the people collecting making a profit? The vendors are looking for transparency as far as what the money is being collected for, and then also equity in not every vendor is being charged and not every vendor is being charged the same amount. So again, one of the things we hope to create with this Vendors Association are various committees to address some of these issues with the collections of the fees and things like that. So that'll be information on that'll be forthcoming to the vendors. I'm just going to check.
That's key. Sorry to interrupt you. That's key in part of your existence as a community of organized vendors. Technically, you should have a committee of X amount of individuals who are the representatives of everybody else. Everybody knows who they are. They're voted by the membership. And then there needs to be kind of like a subcommittee of individuals. Okay, 2 or 3 are going to be in charge of estimating the cost of renting the power pressure cleaner, whatever, or the trash bags, or this and that. And that's going to help you guys really not only support each other, but identify who exactly is asking for money and for what, right? Because if there's 20 people asking for money, but none of them are in the committee to clean or to beautify the area, then something is wrong. And so you hold these two, three folks individual accountable for that. They need to, yeah, provide you receipts. They need to provide you a clear path of what they use the money for. And if there's a surplus of it, then how do you guys keep that money, or where does that money is kept, and how is that to be used later on? I think somebody mentioned that can go to homeless shelters or to assist in the homeless. Yeah, absolutely. You know, but that has to be part of your bylaws as a LLC or as just an organized community.
Okay. And in speaking towards the LLC, so this vendors association has been incorporated as a nonprofit. We just received the articles of incorporation back from the Secretary of State. So we've got that approved. We've applied for and received an EIN, and actually Public Counsel is going to be helping us with the bylaws and creating the rest of the formation for the 501c3. So again, this association, when the founding committee sat down and put these things together, it was a thing of having organized power, but also bringing resources to the street vendors, because there are some vendors who are saying, you know, right now, because of COVID, paying the $291 for the street permit fees is a little more than what I can do. Throughout COVID, other small businesses have been given grants, whether it's PPP or EIDL. There was some grants through LISC, LISC. I don't know what, I can't remember what the initials stand for, but they were giving COVID relief grants. The Urban League also had grants for small Black businesses in the community, but unfortunately, a lot of street vendors were not eligible for those grants because maybe they didn't have their street vendor permit at the time, or they didn't have their taxes done with a Schedule C. So there are also we also want to help the vendors get structured more along the lines of their micro entrepreneurs and micro businesses, so that they have all of their documents together so that they can qualify for some of this COVID relief and grants and things like that. We also, as far as food vendors are concerned in Lamert, the marketplace on Saturdays and Sundays, but more specifically on Sundays, is a big part of the community. Not only is it a big part of the community and the culture, but it also generates a lot of income coming into Lamert. There was an article in SoCal Connect that said just on Juneteenth, with the vendors and all of the activities on that one day, over $600,000 came into the community. So with that much money potential coming into the community, we want to make sure that it's accessible to all of the micro businesses that are street vendors. And also, we want vendors to be recognized as a group that helps generate that kind of traffic and bring that kind of money into the community. So beyond addressing the issues of the permits and the cleaning and the maintenance and things like that, we're trying to create an organization that's going to benefit and grow the street vendors as well. Going back just for a second, I just thought of another question for Sergio and for Katie. So with the food vending in Lamert, until the vendors can get their permits, are there any other alternatives that we could look to help protect the food vendors? For example, someone suggested if we do Saturdays and Sundays as a farmer's market or a flea market. So how does that affect the permits? Is it the same kind of permits needed, or is there something different that would allow the food vendors to continue without having the specific carts?
Yeah, that is a really great question and is something that the LA Street Vending Campaign has looked at previously. So really quickly, I want to just back up and say that there are places in LA like Lamert Park, like the Pinata district, where there is kind of a tradition of sort of high density vending. And we want to preserve those places and ensure that that kind of cultural space can continue to operate. Under this current city regulations, many of those kind of high density places really can't operate because there's a requirement that vendors can only be have to be 5 feet apart. In the parks themselves, there's only 2 vendors who are supposed to be allowed per acre, which is just, who knows what an acre necessarily even looks like. And so those regulations don't really reflect the reality of vending that's out there. So we have looked at, do we help people set up farmers market or swap meets to kind of get around those restrictions? Or do we try to get the city to recognize some of these areas as special? They are special vending areas and they should have different rules and more flexibility in allowing the vending that already happens to keep happening. So know that that's something that we have talked about and have tried to push the city on previously. Obviously, we haven't been successful, but we're continuing to bother them about that. And so hearing from Lamert Park vendors, I think will be really valuable to get City Hall to change some of these rules. But going back to kind of the farmers market question specifically, that may be an option. It is just a different process. The swap meets or farmers markets are usually licensed by the county, I believe, because you do have to get certain health permits for that too. And you may be able to get kind of one license for multiple food vendors, but there are still requirements around having access to bathrooms, having access to kitchens, having access to running water and sinks for health reasons. And so I definitely encourage you all to think about to think about that as an option, but it does have a lot of regulations in of itself. And just to respond to a question real quick in the chat, most food vendors or even food trucks are supposed to have access to some kind of commissary or commercial kitchen, because a lot of food vending, the cooking and the preparation that doesn't happen right on the cart itself is supposed to happen in a kitchen, in a commercial kitchen. Now, again, we're working on figuring out how to not only open more commissary spaces, because there aren't that many that are available, but also to allow people to get their own home kitchen permitted, getting a permit at a restaurant if there's a local restaurant that has extra kitchen space, trying to figure out how to open up the process so more folks can have access to it. So that's kind of a lot of information, but yeah, and churches and school kitchens too. There are a lot of places in the community that have kitchen space that they may not be using all the time. And so how do you work with those spaces to support vendors too?
So
I
just,
have a question. I'm sorry. What's stopping someone else from coming in and with the money or resources or the know-how and setting up a flea market or farmer's market over our heads?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a prevention. There's not a way to stop somebody else from doing that necessarily. And so one idea that I do want to throw out there, it sounds like you all are thinking about having conversations with the neighborhood council, with the Lamert Park Merchants Association. I also encourage you to think about maybe setting up a meeting with Mark Ridley Thomas, the new council member in the area, to talk about, okay, how do we make sure that longstanding small businesses, including vendors who have been in Lamert Park for so long, can continue to operate there and not to have, you know, some form of gentrification or outside money kind of coming in and taking up space that has been held by vendors for so long.
that's part of our agenda, getting meetings with Mark Ridley Thomas, also with the Supervisor Mitchell's office. From our understanding, last year, the county supervisors were able to get some funding to help street vendors. I think it was like $1 million to help with technical assistance, purchasing carts and things like that. Those initiatives didn't make it over here to Lamert Park. So we're looking into how we can bring those kinds of things over here and protect it. Billion has a question. He has a raised hand. Can you unmute yourself, Billion?
No, I just wanted to speak to the sister Onyx question a second ago, as far as individuals who have more resources, know-how. That's happening right now in many different ways. We have individuals both from within the community and outside of the community who are coming and trying to take our space right now. So part of the purpose of forming this association is to get more people involved in the pushback. For the past several years, there have been a number of us going to these different meetings, hearing a number of plans people had, and in some of these meetings, by us speaking and pushing back against it, we've been able to stop some. And in other situations, we've had to get out and protest. We've had to shut stuff down. We had to go to people's homes. We had heard last week that they had planned on shutting down Degnan to film a movie. And our initial question was, well, what impact is this going to have on the vendors? We know Film LA normally makes sure a lot of the merchants over there get paid, but now that we have a tradition of Saturday and Sundays going, for someone to make a decision that they're just going to shut down Degnan and not allow vendors to come set up is cutting off a lot of people's income. So that only happens when we allow it to happen. So part of what we're doing with this association and also with our organization is making sure people don't just step on us. You know, we got to first overstand our right as people. We got to overstand our rights as community and know that we can play by the rules as much as possible, but powers that be know we're already at a disadvantage, both as far as resources, as far as finances, and at this point, even as far as organizations. So don't feel like, you know, it's nothing we can't do or you know, we're powerless. We have a lot of power, and I was sharing in a meeting last night, there were only 8 of us on that call. Today, there's like 22 of us on this call. So as we continue to grow, we're going to have more power, more numbers to push back. We just need people to stay involved in what's happening as far as the policies that are coming, as far as identifying which merchants are going against us. And even on this call right now, I just identified one of the people who's been doing backdoor deals to try to get us up out of here is on this call right now. So that's how serious these people are about getting us out of here. And we have to be equally and even more so committed to making sure we stay here.
So with that being said, this question is for Sergio and Katie, what are some action steps that this vendors association can take right now to help move us forward? What can we do to help support some of the initiatives that you mentioned you guys are bringing to City Council? Help us understand what we can do,
You know, I'm always going to say organize. That has to be the first step. That has to be the first thing. Create your structure, create your bylaws, create your demands, create your identity. And then I think from there, you start building allies, you start integrating yourself with other local movements. LA Street Vending Campaign is not just community power or public council, it's 60 organizations. And it takes about 60 organizations or even more organizations to get something like this passed. I think once you have that structure set in place and your members are informed and educated on the rights, which I'm also going to put a document right here on the chat on rights as vendors that we had created, because we still have rights at the end of the day. I think that's key. Then you start making demands. You can start making demands right now, but I feel like, you know, you don't know who's who, you don't know who's charging, you don't know who's an ally, you don't know who is against you, you know, that has to be clarified within your own organization, your own community of vending. I would probably say, even though you can't get a food permit law, that you start creating your processes to get those permits. I don't know if, I think everybody here has a social security, right? In the communities that I've in, that's hard to get. So folks have to get 2 steps prior to that, right? So right now, if you guys have social securities, get your twin permits, right? The ones that Katie mentioned, the BTRC and the sellers, right? One allows you sell as a regular business, as a brick and mortar. The other one allows you charge for tax and not pay tax when you buy your merchandise or your goods. The street vending permit is $291 right now. You can get it. Out of the 1,200 that I mentioned, I would probably say 1,000 or more are for vendors who sell food. So we're encouraging vendors ourselves right now to get into that process, start legalizing your businesses, kind of get to where the permits allow you to. And then if I sell tacos, for example, but I have a merchant permit, and if city comes, then I use that as a resisting tool, right? Because they're going to try to cite me for not having a permit, but you kind of turn the tables around, right? How is it possible that you're enforcing a permit that does not exist, really? It's not reachable because there is no card, because there is no money, right? So you use that as a tactic to start creating and generating resistance. I think it plays a bigger role than to not have anything right now, because they're going to be like, well, you don't want to follow the law. Even the little bit that exists, you have nothing, right? Right now we have the issue that we can't go to politicians' offices, we can't lobby, we can't do anything else, but we can, you know, they have virtual meetings. We call every other week to the city council or the county. This week we had 2 different calls. One, Hollywood, that's gentrifying and creating these new spaces for brick and mortars and all these kind of elitist places, but not for vendors. So tap into all that, you know. I remember I went to a I don't know if it's Lamert Park or Crenshaw Business Resource Community meeting at the Crenshaw Mall about 1.5 years ago. And mind you, I don't know the dynamics of the politics there, but folks were very receptive when I started passing out these key documents for vendors. They were asking me questions about the law. They were asking me questions about the permits, about the cards, how they could help. So unless there's like a divide there between this community and that entity, if there isn't, explore that option. You know, you gotta wait and analyze. I don't know if you want to add more, Katie.
Yeah, I mean, everything that Sergio said, I think is right. It's important to build power among yourselves and then express that power to the local elected officials. But I also want to say, I think even right now, as individuals, you know, call Holly Mitchell's office, call MRT's office, and register kind of these complaints of getting pushed out, getting harassed, and not having enough resources. You know, again, you all are small businesses and you bring a lot to the community and to the economy, and they should recognize that. So I think it's important to register those complaints and concerns with the local electeds.
I have a question. I'd like to know if you all have any information on the COVID relief funds or the grants. Do we have access to any of that right now?
Sergio, I'm not totally up to date on that. There was a push to get small business relief and make that open to vendors. And at one point, I think, even got them to set aside a pot of money that was only accessible for vendors. I don't know if that's still available, but I can look into that and let you all know if they're still accepting applications on that. But I don't know, Sergio, do you have any up-to-date information?
You know, I think the last time I heard there was a LISC type of assistance was in late December. I didn't hear anything in January to today. I can research whatever I can find and I can send them. I think I don't know whose email I have, to be honest with you, but I can send whatever I find. I think typically it's hard for the city or the government to say, oh, this is specific for vendors. Because I think they cannot just say this is for vendors themselves. And it has been hard for us to push for something similar to that, where it's all related to like the language that they use. So they kind of have vendors and blah, 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 you know?
Or was it including small businesses?
Yeah, but that opens up everybody, right? That opens up a large chunk of the industry. But the only type of requirement that they typically require is that you have a taxes from the year previous. So for December, they require 2019. You have a greater chance if you have the BTRC and the tax one, the seller's permit, because that legitimizes your business, right? It says even though your previous taxes can be personal, not necessarily as a business, because you couldn't get it in 2019 because vending was illegal back then, right? Yes. I'll look for some, and whatever I'll find, I can send them to Jen.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to respond, Nemia's posting in the chat that it sounded like those funds were supposed to be done or not available anymore after December, but because those funds came from the federal government, and the federal government not only put more money into local governments, but they also changed some of the rules. So there might still be some money left. I just don't know if they changed those rules. So we can look into that.
And beyond those grants, so with the grant that came out in December, if it's the same one that you're speaking of, it was through LISC, it was from federal funds, and the requirement was that you had to have a street vendor's permit prior to October 2020, when they gave this grant out in December 2020. So I don't know if there are going to be additional grants coming out, but we want to get as many vendors their permits as many as possible, as soon as possible, so that if there is another opportunity that comes out and the requirement is that you have to have your street vendor's permit, then you will have it and you'll be eligible for the grant at that point. The Urban League was specifically, excuse me, doing grants for small Black businesses. And they just required your tax returns from 2019. I don't know if the Urban League still has those grants available. A committee of us from this Vendors Association will be meeting with the Urban League next week. So we'll find out, in addition to the grants that they already have available, we're trying to work with a grant writer. So if there's anybody in our community that is a grant writer and willing to work with us, but we're also trying to write some grants to get money for the vendors. So that's one of the resources that we're working on. The other thing that we want to try to position ourselves to do on behalf of the food vendors is to find or create a Black-owned commercial kitchen within close proximity to Lamert. Also with a same thing with the commissary, because what the food vendors are telling us is that the closest commissary right now is all the way on Slauson and San Pedro, and that one is full, is what this person, told us. So we're trying to work on these things on a big collective community scale. I have one more question. Katie, I don't know if you guys will know the answer to this, but is it possible to get Lamert designated like a historical cultural area similar to like Alvera Street?
Yeah, I'm not very familiar with that process. There is, I have looked at it before. There's a process to it, and it can be done either at the city level, at the state level, or even at the federal level. But that is possible to designate Lamert Park that way. I would just want to do some research to ensure that doing that will actually allow the vendors to continue operating and to be small businesses in that way. And we haven't talked about this, but I do want to make a comment about the current restrictions on Lamert Park. So technically, vending is not allowed within Lamert Park, and it's a very specific restriction. That's a historical restriction. So I'm sorry if this sounds totally out there, but back in the like 1910s, 1920s, when Lamert Park was first created, it was actually built by a private landowner. And it was the same developer that built some of the neighborhoods around the park. And so this was a white guy, and he put what are called covenants on both the park and on the homes that were built nearby. And so a covenant is kind of like a contract or a written statement that it attaches to the land itself. And so even when the property owner sells the home or the park, that covenant or contract continues to stay with the park or with the property. And the reason I'm saying all of this is because that developer, when he gave the park to the city, he had a covenant on it that said that there should not be any commercial activity that happens in the park. Now, we know that the city has never really enforced that covenant until they passed the vending regulations just in the past year or so. And yes, billion is exactly right. This is a racist covenant. Most of the time you hear people talk about covenants, it's a racist covenant that was put on a house to prevent minorities, most of the time African Americans, from being able to buy and live in a certain house. Now, those are no longer allowed, and they're no longer legally enforceable on homes. However, this park still has that no commercial activity covenant attached, still has it attached to the park. It's my belief, and many people that I've talked to about it, that it is racist, that it was an attempt to keep people from selling things in the park. And so, but the city has allowed things like filming to happen inside the park. They've issued permits to allow things like that to happen in the park. And so we have asked them repeatedly to do away with that covenant and to open up the park, to respect the vending that has happened there for many years. And they haven't listened to us about that. But I definitely encourage you all to look at that. We're happy to come talk about it again and to provide some of the research we've done on that. It sounds like others have done research on that too, to try to push the city to do away with that covenant and to allow vendors to continue operating there.
Okay, thank you. Onyx has a raised hand. I believe she has a question.
Yeah, even if we're able to do that, don't they have a right to actually close those gates from dusk till dawn? Like they have a certain amount of time where the park closes down, which, impedes our, businesses.
Yeah, so the city does have the ability to kind of set hours on public parks, and they do that on lots of parks. I know that and again, I'm not super familiar with the park area, but I know that there's been a situation with the actual fencing going up around that, which I think is just really in violation of public space, and isn't okay. But that is something that other vendors and other parks have had to deal with too, in the sense that they're supposed to leave once the parks close down, even if there's not necessarily a fence that gets closed. So again, that's something that I think it would be great to advocate for. Like, this park is typically used by the public for longer hours than what you say are the public hours, and so that needs to be changed.
So right now, there's actually a petition that's been going around to get the park reopened. I don't have the link right here at my fingertips, but what I can do is post the link for this petition. If you email us, info@lpvvendors.com, we can send you the link to the petition. We'll also post it in the link tree on the vendor's Instagram page. And then Vernell Trainer, who's on the call, he's actually creating a website for the vendors. So once that's up, we'll be able to post the link on there as well. And since I mentioned the website, I'm going to ask Vernell to speak on it just a little bit, because the goal is to use the website in addition to the social media to get information out to all of the vendors. And there's going to be a portion with an online vendor directory so we can know who's who in the who's vending in Lamert Park on a regular basis. So Vernell, can you speak to that? Vernell, are you there? We see you, but you're not, we can't hear you.
Could you hear me now?
Okay, yes, there you are.
Okay, hi. I've been having some audio issues. I apologize. I'm speaking on small business. Speaking on SoCal Shop Local, which is a virtual mall for small business owners that's looking to sell products or maybe have a virtual office online. Um, it's very affordable. It's an easy and effortless way to be able to sell your products online. SoCal Shop Local it's as simple as it sounds. It's a call to action. It's basically telling everyone, hey, SoCal, shop local. We at SoCal, we shop local, we take no percentage of the products that's sold from your virtual store. How it basically works is just as if you was to lease out a storefront inside of a mall, you basically pay us a web hosting fee to have your virtual store inside of SoCal Shop Local Virtual Mall, and it's extremely affordable. It's only $39 per month. That also include an account manager, someone to help manage your online presence, such as when you have new products that you would like to add to your virtual mall. If you want to create a coupon code for customers, you just forward that information over to your account manager, and we would make that updates on your behalf. I also wanted to mention for this particular call, we do provide you a unique subdomain name that's included with your store. So for instance, it would be yourstore.socalshoplocal.com. But for this specific call right here, I would love to get anyone that's interested and want to sign up of having an online virtual mall or store, your very own domain name for free that will connect to your virtual mall. So anyone who do sign up for a virtual mall on SoCal Shop Local will give you your own domain name. So basically when someone type in www.yourbusiness.com, it'll redirect them directly to your virtual mall within SoCal Shop Local. And I'm not sure if that I tackle everything, Jen, but if I missed out on anything that I could help or benefit anyone that's out there, please let me know.
Thank you for that. So in addition to doing the virtual mall, Vernell's also helping to build out a website for the Vendors Association. He's also located inside of Copy City, right there on Crenshaw. So I mention this because we're going to be doing more dissemination of information through flyers, through social media, through, we'd like to start interviewing individual vendors and getting their information out there with the goal of having people know and understand who the vendors are and not just lump all the vendors together in a group with negative connotations attached. Oh, the vendors left this mess in Lamert Park, or oh, the vendors did this. But we want the community, the surrounding community, to start to understand, these we are individual business owners contributing to the community in different ways, and we'd like to be recognized as such. So I hope this call answered a lot of questions that people may have had. If you have additional questions, please email us, info@lpvvendors.com. Excuse me, we'll do our best to get the answers for you. If we don't know the answers, then we will reach out to resources that can help us, groups such as people in groups such as Katie and Sergio. We thank them for being here today. If there are no more questions, we can go ahead and end the call. I'll keep it up for just a little while because in the chat, we've put links. In the beginning of the chat, there's a link tree. It says LA Legal Assistant. But once you click on there, it will give you the link to the office of the City of Los Angeles Office of Finance. That's where you sign up for your business tax registration certificate. There's a link to get your California seller's permit. There's a link to Streets LA, which is where you get your street vendor's permit. Once you go online and do your tax registration certificate and your seller's permit, then you have to call down to Bureau of Street Services, make an appointment and physically go in person to their office on Broadway and 11th, and you pay your $291 and they give you your street vending ID. It's an actual photo ID, excuse me, that you're required to display when you're vending. There's also a link on there for public counsel, and there's also a link on there for Community Collective Power, the group where Sergio is from. There's also a link to my website, LA Legal Assistant, in addition to helping with the issues for the street vending. There are people who are still having problems paying their rent. So we have resources to direct people if you're in need of rental assistance or if you're in the eviction process. There's Stay Housed LA, which is providing attorneys for people who are being evicted. The attorneys will actually go to court with you and represent you. So again, this is about being from the community, of the community, and for the community. So whatever resources that people let us know that they need, then we'll do our best to bring those resources to the table for you. It looks like there's a few more questions that just popped up. Naima, do you have a question?
Hi, am I off mute?
Yes, you're off mute. We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay, hi, I'm sorry, I'm driving. I just had a question in regards to trying to get a commissary space or a commercial kitchen. There's so many empty buildings, empty lots within, not necessarily just the direct Lamert Park area, but South Central in general. Has there been a conversation with maybe like a commercial realtor or looking into getting some type of investors? We have all these Black millionaires who grew up in South Central who might still be in the area, because to me, I see that as an investment. If you provide those services, you would have to provide a monthly fee for those services. So it would be residual income coming in for somebody. So it's just, I don't know if that's been explored. Empty lots and buildings, all this stuff, building area stuff, looking into investors, looking into realtors, commercial realtors as to how to create that space and to show that if we charge a monthly fee every month for people to utilize the spaces, they're going to get something back on their investment. So I'm not sure, that just popped in my head. So I'm not sure if that's something that, you guys have looked into as far as getting those commercial spaces and for the food vendors and all that stuff.
That is a great question, a great thought, and it's something that we've actually been looking into. One of the committees that will be formed within this Vendors Association is going to be a committee to see about making that possible. There's a lot of vacant space, like, excuse me, like you're saying, right in Lamert. So we're looking at how do we put together the funding, what kind of leadership is going to be needed to make this, happen. So there has been conversation around that. If you want to be, part of that conversation and creating the business plan, the grant, or whatever the case, whatever we need to make that happen, then please email us and let us know that's the committee that you want to be on, because we definitely need people who are knowledgeable in that area. Again, for the food vendors, we're looking to how do we get a commercial kitchen? How do we get commissaries? One of the food vendors mentioned that the cost of certain ingredients are very expensive, but if we did a collaboration of all the food vendors, then maybe there's a way to negotiate discounts so those ingredients are cheaper for all vendors, So again, please sign up for that committee. And I'm not a food vendor, so there's a lot of parts of it that I don't know. So we need the food vendors to come together and bring all that knowledge to the table. And then we figure out how do we put it together so that we can get funding for it. And we're hoping that there's going to be a lot of available funding, because now there's this conversation around food deserts. And we are, part of that food desert. So how do we get some of those resources to solve some of those problems? I think there was another question. We're looking to form the committees immediately. Excuse me. I've put our email address into the chat box. I can put it in again, but you can also reach out to us on Instagram. We're looking to do all of this stuff like today. This was our inaugural meeting. This was our first meeting. Now that we kind of have a feel for who we are and what the goals and the visions are, we need to get these committees established. We need to have, meetings started, and we just need to start with our action steps as soon as possible. There are 3 people with their hands raised. Let's see. It doesn't show me their names. If you have your hand raised, can you just go ahead and start speaking?
I agree. This is Billion. You can hear me?
Yes.
So a couple years ago, we had got to where we were boycotting a number of different Korean businesses throughout the community. And at a certain point, we were in meetings with both the Korean American Federation and the Korean American Grocers Association. And through those meetings, we learned how they actually position themselves to take over a lot of the industry in our cities in a number of different areas. And on one side, yes, is collectively putting their monies together so they can invest and buy properties, so they can invest. When you look at wholesale, a lot of times we are buying wholesale by the box, but the next step up from buying by the box, you buy by the crate. And then after you buy by the crate, you buy by the truck, and then you buy the whole cargo from the shipping yard. So that's one side of it. But on the other side of it is having an influence on public policy. So every year the budget is decided by our officials. And to this point, there hasn't been a lot of conversation concerning Black street vendors. So to this point, the attitude against a lot of street vendors in the Black community was how to criminalize and penalize it. So moving forward, as more people get involved, as we get more involved with these neighborhood council meetings, stakeholder meetings, and eventually sitting down with the Mark Ridley Thomases, Holly Mitchell's, whatnot, as they give their input towards budgets, they can then include a budget to help vending businesses acquire these commissaries, carts, and whatever else is needed. So we don't have to look again like it's a lost cause or impossible for us to acquire these things, but we have 2 means: by one, collectively putting our finances together, but also lobbying to get the city to give us a reinvestment of the tax dollars we're spending every day.
Thank you for that, Billion. So again, this call has been like great, overwhelming, better than we had imagined. So we hope we can continue the energy. Please sign up for one of the committees. One of the committees that we want to start with immediately is budget committee, because we want to start being able to take positive affirmative action within within the village on Saturdays and Sundays. So we need to get together a team so we can understand how much it costs for the trash, for the porta potties, and for the security. And we need to start doing that like ASAP. So anyone who's willing to work with us on that, please reach out. The other committees are important as well, and we're going to work on forming those. So again, we need people to email to the info@lpvvendors.com, or to reach out through the Instagram page so that we can get all of these things started and in place, so we can set up weekly planning calls, and then so we can start getting an idea of who's willing to go with us to these meetings. So when we meet with, the council person's office or the supervisor's office, who can be part of that with us. One more raised hand, and then I think we'll be able to close out for today. Was there another comment?
I just wanted to say really quickly in regards to the commissary spaces. I'm in conversations with a coalition, including BSS, every month. And late last month, for like 2-3 months or so, we were exploring that, right? All these vacant spots. I had talked to vendor leaders to go into their communities and talk to business owners to see if we can get access to the kitchens. They can rent them before or after their regular sales. Churches, we identified a handful of churches. We identified a handful of schools. I was able to personally ID 2 restaurants that were willing to open up their kitchens in the morning and after dark. But unfortunately, something that kind of made it really hard to continue was that yes, DPH has committed themselves to going into these restaurants and checking them out, making sure the sink is here, the dry area is here, the fridge works, there's hot water. But they didn't tell us this until like we actually invested so much effort into it, is that at the end of the day, a vendor needs to take out their food from this restaurant that has a permit, and it has to transport it somewhere else, whether it's across the street, whether it's a mile or a couple of blocks. And they were very stubborn that even if you do that, you still need a cart that's permitted by DPH. So it brought us back to zero, right? So I think that, yeah, you guys can start building that infrastructure already, right? Identifying locations, schools, churches, et cetera, et cetera. But a problem is always going to be this cart. And I think that's where, as a collective group of interest within Lamert Park, you start lobbying and you start putting pressure on these local politicians to make sure that whatever is happening in the county, and the county is going to try to solve everything once this cart gets clarified, right? But they also have to make sure that they invest into this program themselves. And they themselves have to push BSS to stop harassing folks for vending for a lack of permit that does not exist. So yeah, I just wanted to share that. And that has been something that we have come across with DPH. They're just extremely stubborn.
Okay, so can I ask this question? When you say the food has to be removed at the end of the night, is that a storage issue, or is that a Department of Health requirement that the vendor take their food out?
Yeah, so if a vendor is using a kitchen, let's say, I don't know, any kitchen, right? Um, Vendor still has to go and sell it in the street somewhere. So from the kitchen to the plate of a client, that vendor still needs to move that food, those goods in a cart that has approval by DPH. So at the end of the day, you still need a cart, a vending cart that has all the bells and whistles that DPH wants you to get. So yeah, you can cook in a kitchen that has permits, and you can. There's a lot of pop-ups already that are happening where vendors are using these spaces, these kitchen spaces, these restaurant kitchen spaces, and that's an agreement between the vendor and the owner of the restaurants. Where okay, today I'm gonna sell, I don't know, chicken. Tomorrow I'm gonna sell Mexican food or something else, right? But it's under my name, under Sergio's Tacos or whatever. And that has worked to some extent because that allows vendors to generate a little bit of money. But if I were to still use that kitchen, but go across the street to sell my food that's already kind of prepped, and then I would still need a cart. So that automatically has limits.
Okay, so then can I ask this question? Let's say hypothetically, somebody gave me $1 million tomorrow and said, hey, Jen, you can buy all the street vending carts that you can with $1 million. Is there already in existence a cart that is approved and ready to go, like out the door? Like if someone bought it today, they could take it to public health and get it approved tomorrow. Does that exist?
You wanna answer, Katie?
Yeah, what it comes down to, it depends on what type of food you're selling.
Okay.
So yeah, so there are some carts that are out there on the market right now that you could buy, but they're typically limited to ice cream. So the kind of small refrigerated cube that's on a set of wheels that can be permitted, but it's only for frozen items, for frozen prepackaged items. There's also some fruit carts that are permitted, but really the universe of food items that you could sell out of those carts is pretty limited.
Okay. So then other than like a full-on food truck, what options are available for vendors, or is this why we're saying that it does not yet exist?
Yeah, exactly. And I know there have been a few questions about food trucks in the chat, and I do want to say, like, that's a totally separate thing because a food truck is in the street as opposed to on the sidewalk. And so that's kind of just a totally different process. But yes, there are really no carts that are on the market right now that can be permitted to sell food that's really outside of a few different categories. And that's why Sergio and I and lots of different stakeholders are working with DPH right now and with a design firm to design a cart that will fit on the sidewalk, that can be used to vend lots of different types of food, that's affordable, and that is small enough for the sidewalk.
Okay.
But it's just not on the market yet.
Not on the market yet. Okay. Okay. So unless there are any other questions, I think this is a good place to wrap it up. We've put links in the chat. Katie put her email in the chat as well. If anyone doesn't see it and wants her contact information or Sergio's, please just email me and I will send the information out. Sergio put also some documents into the chat. If anyone didn't get a chance to download them, I will download them all, and then I will post links to them on the vendor's Instagram page. If there's anything that you think I'm forgetting, please let me know. Otherwise, we will end here and follow up as people email and volunteer for the committees and things like that.
So I'm just gonna drop the 3 documents that I shared initially, so folks can have them. During this pandemic, obviously, it's really hard for us to move and go out and everything else. But if anybody, I communicate and I send a lot of these documents via WhatsApp. If anybody uses WhatsApp, I'll put my number in here. You guys can shoot me a text. I'll try to reach back, reply as I can. But if it's a matter of like you needing documents or general stuff for vending, feel free to text me via WhatsApp, because WhatsApp has, you can send large files. I can send books through WhatsApp versus regular text that allows a certain size of it. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that. Again, thank you, Sergio. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Vernell. And thank you all to all the vendors and everyone who attended and tuned into the meeting today. The meeting was recorded, and I will share a link again through the vendor social media link tree, so that people who missed the recording or who missed the meeting today can go back and tap into the recording. So again, my name is Jennifer, LA Legal Assistant. I can help people apply for their permits. Again, the links are on the link tree, but if you have difficulty, you have questions, then please feel free to reach out to me. We'll set up a one-on-one Zoom and I'll walk you through the process to get your business tax registration certificate, your seller's permit, and help you schedule your appointment with Street Services LA. And that's it for today. Thank you, everyone, again.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having us. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, communicate with shit. Hold on. Okay, that was cool. That shit, whoo, child, it would never end.